Good afternoon, Sydney. Thank you for joining me. I'm excited because we're continuing a new content series here at GitKraken, all about the first 5 years in software development. And that could be for folks that are, coming out of school, fresh into the workforce. It could be folks that are making a career change from something software development adjacent or something even further afield and coming over here. But we want to be able to bring insights and share our own experience and perspective on what folks can expect and how to position themselves to be successful. So I'm really thrilled that you could be joining us and would love if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. So I am Sydney Edman. I am currently the People Operations Manager at GitKraken. I have actually been with GitKraken for a little under 4 years now. I started as a technical recruiter on the talent and recruitment side of things and recently transitioned into an HR or People Operations Manager role. My career has been pretty tech focused, and my last few roles have been at tech companies and specifically tech startups. So I'm really excited to be here at GitKraken and using that expertise the best I can.
Well, that's perfect. Today, we're actually going to be talking about tips and recommendations for what software developers can expect in, the early goings on at a tech company and really setting them up to thrive. And even more specifically than just a tech company, but, what we're experiencing and what a lot of our peers are as well, a distributed one. So I'm excited to dive in. Got a bunch of questions for you, and we'll just riff like two friends
Great.
talking across the virtual bar from one another.
Sounds good. In my professional career, I would say that onboarding and specifically like the maybe few weeks before you start a company and the few weeks after you start at a company is an area of passion of mine because I feel like you have the opportunity to really as a new hire and as a company really set yourself up for success. And I say all the time, even if people are really excited to join the company, right? Even if someone is really, really excited to join GitKraken, that transition into the company is going to be chaotic, right? It's a major life event. So there are ways that we can, on the employer side, make sure that that is a smooth process for the new hire. And there are things on the new hire side that they can do to make sure that they're streamlining the process as well. At GitKraken, we structure our onboarding to be between 4 and 6 weeks. And we structure it to include kind of both higher level company and product information and the kind of, in the weeds technical information that someone needs, to be able to execute and do their job. And I think that's a really good way to approach it, both from the company and the employee side of you. It's important to understand the processes and the tech and the framework. And it's also really important to know how the work you do will impact the bigger picture. It's valuable information as you start ramping up and being productive. In the first 30 days, a developer can really set themselves up for success by focusing on, like I said, the bigger picture as well as the kind of in the weeds information that they need to be able to do their work. And I was starting a new job. This was a few jobs back. And I remember I was going through onboarding with one of my coworkers, and she gave me a little sentiment that has kind of followed me through my career. And she said, you're going to be getting a lot of information throughout your onboarding, and there's no way that you can retain it all, right? You can take as detailed notes as you possibly can. We can provide you with all of the resources in the world, and there are still going to be questions that you need to know the answer to. And she said, don't be afraid to ask questions, even 2 or 3 times if you have to, even if it seems excessive. I don't know many people that would not want to hear a question 3 times if the alternative is someone doing something incorrectly, right? So I think that could be true for both technical and non-technical folks as well, is not being afraid to ask for help or ask questions, especially in that onboarding period where it's really encouraged, right? And the bulk of what you're doing is kind of soaking up information. The biggest tip that I can give to people, and especially developers who are going through onboarding, is knowing when to ask questions and what questions to ask, and not being afraid to. I would say don't limit yourself. Any developer coming onto a that's entering a new company should feel free to reach out to anyone that they think might be impactful in their journey at that company. And it won't be unwelcome. In my role, I get to meet everyone who comes in the door, but I've also had people just set up one-on-ones to get to know me a little bit, and that's very welcome. I think that's very welcome across the company as well. And then the second part of your question, on top of having a strong grasp on kind of the technical aspects of your job, during onboarding, I think people have the opportunity to kind of showcase their personality. First impressions are really important, and that's true in a new position as well. Going through the onboarding process and kind of looking inward and thinking, am I able to be self-sufficient? Am I unafraid to ask for help? Do I focus on how problems can be solved? The way that you showcase your personality in those first few weeks, and if you're able to kind of demonstrate drive and focus through that, you're going to really be able to set yourself up for success in a way that kind of goes beyond just knowing the technical aspects of your role. How you nail the introduction is going to depend a lot on the company that you're joining and the team that you're talking to. And I think in those instances in particular, it's really important to know your audience and kind of gauge what type of information they're looking for in an introduction. So, if it's a more formal meeting, or in a meeting potentially with executives, or maybe it's a larger, more established company, it is generally best to stick to like name, role, a sentence about your experience, right? And if the meeting is with your peers, or it's more casual, then you can start to give information about like your interest and your hobbies outside of work, and you have a little bit more flexibility to be kind of playful with your introduction. This is an interesting question, and I think my answer to this is going to be potentially a little bit different than expected, coming from someone who works in HR. But I think it's potentially less important to know what is appropriate versus inappropriate than it is to know your audience, know your audience, and make sure that you're managing your perception. As an example, you're never going to ask like your boss's boss if you can expense your lunch, right? Especially like if you're onboarding and you're wanting to set yourself up for success at that company, whereas you might feel more comfortable asking a peer, or someone who is on the HR or the benefits side of things. So within reason, I would say there aren't really any out of bounds questions that are in line with benefits or the way that we benefit from the company that we work from. It's just about knowing who to go to get the answer to that question. The learning is never going to be over, right? On day 91, you might not be doing as much, rigid onboarding, but you're still going to be learning and seeking out resources as you need them. So even when the official onboarding is complete, the learning never really stops. It just kind of shifts. I'll start by saying I am personally a big advocate of remote work, and I see the shifts taking place in the tech industry, but in our larger market as well, as being really positive. I also understand that when we are working remotely, it means that we have to be more intentional about staying connected to our coworkers in a way that may seem to come a little bit more naturally when we're all together in the same physical space. My number one tip is using the tools that are at your disposal, whether it's Slack or Teams or Google Workspace, whatever they call theirs. They're rolling out new features all the time that help people stay connected, and specifically stay connected in a remote or distributed or asynchronous environment, using that video or that voice functionality, collaborating on files and projects in real time, or it could be something as simple as just sharing some pictures of your pets in Slack. All of those go a long way towards kind of strengthening that camaraderie, right? That can often come from working in an office. I think this is really going to come down to personal preference and what works best for you. I was just having a conversation today about someone who really enjoys a lot of like background noise, giving themselves something to focus on that's not their work. And another coworker chimed in and they said, I can't work like that. And they said, I need complete silence. I can't even listen to any music. And of course, that's going to differ by person to person. And I think the nice thing about the shift that we're seeing in the industry towards remote work is that we have a lot more options, whether it comes to the desks that we have in our own homes, or going out and working in a coffee shop or a library or something like that. Just figuring out what works for you and the way that you work is going to be really helpful in the long run. I think the way that we work and the way that developers work, is generally in sprints. So giving yourself a little bit of downtime, potentially scheduled downtime throughout the day or throughout the week, is really important as well. I think we all understand how it can be when we get kind of in the zone and we don't look away from our computer for 4 or 5 hours, right? There are tools and there are kind of best practices for making sure that you are stepping away from your computer as often as you need, or even just having a conversation with a coworker for 10 to 15 minutes, that can kind of break up that workflow a little bit and make it more sustainable in the long run. There's a platform that I know that several people here at GitKraken use. It's called Reclaim. It's a bot that you can download to Google Calendar, which is what we use here at GitKraken, and it'll automatically block off time for you during the day at whatever cadence you'd like. So I have it set to schedule me to go on 3 30-minute walks per week. And I know some people have it to schedule their daily lunches. And the way that it works is it kind of schedules around your existing schedule. So if someone schedules a meeting during that time, it'll just adjust to another time that works for your schedule. And not having to think about scheduling time for yourself is very helpful. And I do go on my 3 walks per week thanks to Reclaim. So there are some companies, and specifically tech companies, that will offer a home office stipend or a reimbursement as part of an employer's benefit offerings. So usually you see this as being around maybe $500 or $1,000, and this is generally to fund the what I'm going to call non-essential for the purposes of clarity. So think like the accessories, right? So not your MacBook, not your additional monitor. And this is to help kind of furnish your home office. We saw a rise of this type of benefit during the pandemic, obviously. I wouldn't say that it's super common. It is more common in the tech industry and with tech startups as well. And then on the flip side of that, you have employers who will give you your equipment that you need to use for your role. In those instances, there's not usually a ton of wiggle room on, what employees are allowed to have. Usually it's kind of a standard laptop, two monitors, keyboard type of situation. But it never hurts to look through your employee handbook and ask. You might be able to get a mechanical keyboard or a pair of AirPods out of it. The audience probably knows this, but I think a really important factor here is to stay flexible, right? What is working for a company and a team at one stage, is probably not going to be sustainable throughout that company's, growth period or through your entire professional career. And I would just say, stay open to these types of changes when they occur, and it'll be easier for everyone in the long run.
Thank you so much, Sydney. Appreciate you sharing your experience and expertise here. A lot of great stuff, and hope viewers get some good takeaways out of it. I know I did.
Me too. Thank you.